Welcome to Beyond Just Business, the podcast for those who want more. More clarity, more direction, and potentially more meaning. We explore the thinking behind success, the habits that shape performance, and the questions that go deeper than profit margins. If you're ready to challenge the obvious and rethink the way life and business work, you are absolutely in the right place. Welcome back to another episode of Beyond Just Business. We've got Paul Davis and myself, Andrew Rattigan, discussing another topic that goes, guess what? Beyond just business. And today we're going to be following on from our conversation about the stories we tell ourselves. And we're going to be talking about one of those topics that is always at the top of our LinkedIn feed, whether you like it or not, the myth of work-life balance. So, Paul, have at it. You think work-life balance is fantastic, don't you?
Absolutely. There's no such thing as balance, for God's sake. No, okay, look, the question I have in my mind is why you're looking for balance. When most people hear about this, they kind of think from the point of view of they work so many X number of hours and they want to have a personal life during the remainder hours. And they tend, especially with the working from home or working remotely, they tend to be working longer hours and having less personal time. But I've gone on the premise of, yeah, but what if you actually love doing what you love to do? You're doing what you actually love to do. Well, then why would you seek balance in that? Because ultimately you're getting what you want to do. That's the approach I take.
Now, let's caveat this with, when you meet people, I think like everything, the previous one we talked about was who you surround yourself with, and the stories we tell often has a knock-on effect on our environment, who we're around, our attitude, our mindset. When people are looking at the concept of that work-life balance, it probably is one of those not pre-tech, but it's one of those classic ways that we compartmentalize our lives, which is, well, I work from 9 till 5. Before work, I'm free, in inverted commas. After 5, I'm free. Much like when we were in school previous to mobiles and we just had answer machines. It was what it was. If someone couldn't get you, they couldn't get you. But if you have someone now that's identity is completely wrapped up in something they hate, maybe it's a case that they say, well, I don't have any work-life balance. But the internal question there you're going back to is, well, maybe you don't like what you do or don't like what you're
Yeah.
So what's interesting here is Alex Hormozi is I don't know if you've come across him. He is a very interesting guy. He is a phenomenal business.
He's better than mine.
Absolutely. Sorry, but I have to put it out there. There's someone out there. You're number 2 on the list, but number 1 has to go to Alex Hormozi. But he has a company called acquisition.com, and he talks about this work-life balance. People have this concept that there has to be a clear delineating line between working and, let's say, the production line, the equivalent of the factory. You clock in, clock out. And when you clock out, that's finally your time, and you can use those meager hours to do what you want. But I wonder, is that also folding in that people are doing things they don't like to receive a reward or remuneration that they feel will make them feel happier? But then suddenly a year of, well, that's just enough to earn money for a house or a car or a deposit for whatever, turns into a decade. And that turns into a life of, well, you've only ever been doing this particular job. The question I would ask is, when you meet someone who has that mindset, how do you get them to rethink it?
Because I just as you're talking, I think it's too clinical. I think it depends on the person that you're actually talking to. So you could get an employee, for example, on a production line, and it's quite easy for them to clock off in both mentally and physically at 5 o'clock or 5:30, because they don't necessarily, I'm not saying they don't, but they don't necessarily have to worry about the company or what's happening or so on. They're basically on a production line producing the same thing day in, day out. Okay. You take middle management, or you take managers within the company, or you take the owner of the company. They'll never switch off. It's impossible for them to switch off because they are regularly thinking about the business or what they need to do or the clients that they're working with and all the kinds of things. Trying to get them to switch off, you can't, because they'll think about it 24/7. But what absolutely has to be built in, so putting a delineation between, well, you got to clock off at 9:30 or at 5:30 and don't think about the business and don't think about the work and don't think about, don't answer your emails and so on. Yes, you can have habits and disciplines from the point of view of not checking emails or not taking phone calls. You can bring those in. That's easy. But you can't get the person to switch off mentally because they'll still continue to think about the business. but you'll have to bring in other areas, which is around self-care. And that's a given. So if they are constantly working and they're constantly doing things that is all about giving, for one better word, meaning giving their energy, giving their mental capacity, and not looking after themselves from a self-care perspective, now you're running on empty. And that's a recipe for disaster. That's where you get overload, overwhelm, burnout. You get all those aspects coming in through. And that's where people will now start to talk about, okay, well, I need to bring some balance into my life. So I think there's a distinction between what are you actually doing from a working perspective, and do you love doing what you're doing? That's one aspect. And do you have any self-care practices in your life in order to recharge the battery?
So there you're almost looking at the next stage up from the classic office layout where someone is sitting in a chair, bums in seats from 9 a.m. to 5 p.m. Because like I still have this at the back of my head. You know, you leave, you're in at 7 in the morning, you do your work, you're leaving at 4:30. Half day, is it? And the amount of people I've wanted to throw through a monitor and a laptop or smash their head off a wall, metaphorically, when they say that to me. But you could pick 5 people in your head, and I guarantee you could, historically, that would pop into mind where they say that. It is almost that systemic mindset. You know, like you see me in a pair of shorts walking along, like even say first thing this morning, I go for a walk around the blocks, it's not lashing rain. I could
Yep.
have that perception of, it's nearly 8 o'clock and who might see me? Why am I at a desk and a laptop? But I am always thinking about work, and I absolutely relish it because the opportunities I have to try an idea, have it go wrong, figure it out, get a little bit of it right, get a taste of success, try again, whatever it may be. That's my reframe, as opposed to you go somewhere and you think 6 more hours and I'm gone. And then I get to do what I really want to do.
Yep.
But, and I say, but, does modern society lend itself to people actually taking that approach?
In some respects, it does. We're getting better at it. And I think you've gotten, as an employee, no, we haven't gotten there yet, because I'm still coming across companies that are trying their best to force staff back into the office. And I just question my mind why. They're paying high rents, high rates, and all that kind of things. And yeah, look, we discussed before in terms of there are some benefits, but look at, there's an awful lot more to be done. We need to relook at the model. But on the flip side, if you're a business owner, part of business owners are still operating in the same way in terms of they go to the office at 9 o'clock and they finish at maybe 6 o'clock or 7 o'clock or because they tend to work longer hours. And they don't take off midweek. They still think the weekend is their weekend, as opposed to they are in total and utter complete control of how they want to have the week. So, if it's sunny today, well, why not take the day off? Most business owners can't because they haven't created a business. They've just created another job. So there's an awful lot of moving parts in order to get to the point whereby you can take off midweek if you chose to, or operate from Portugal and run the business from there. It's the story you tell yourself. It's the beliefs that you have and the habits and the passions that you've literally just fallen yourself into, as opposed to questioning all of those and saying, actually, look at which way do I want to actually structure my business.
What's interesting there about what you said, and I'm going to go back to the first sentence you said, discussions you have with employers who want to force people back to the office. Force.
Yeah. Force.
What a word.
Oh, because okay, look at full disclosure. My son got an email from his boss saying you're out on site Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, and you appeared in the office on Thursday and you worked from home on Friday. Why did you work from home on Friday? So that's the tone of the email. It just beggars belief. Like, honestly, I'm just saying it really actually just beggars belief. But I know that the motive behind it is because they've got an empty office and they're paying high rents. That's literally just the only motivation that's in it, because there's no collaboration between the different people within the company, but they're paying a high rent in city centre. They've moved into a really big building, spent millions in refurbishing the actual building itself without thinking what was actually going to happen post-COVID, because this was all done during and into the early days past COVID. So it is recent, but yet these are people who want to get their staff into the office. It blows my mind, to be quite honest. And yet, on the flip side, they've already lost 6 individuals from his department. because they've left because of MO within the company. And my son is kind of saying, actually, maybe I'll leave. Maybe it's gotten to the point now I need to kind of find somewhere else that I'm more valued.
Is it like this is the classic thing? See, like the first word that you mentioned was force, right? But also when you think about this idea of being like the real estate investment, so like I'm in property and I see the value people put in bricks and mortar, and whether that be a residential setting, but equally a commercial setting, that there is almost this old world idea of I've built this for you. You will like it, whether you like it or not. But don't forget to come to the Christmas party and don't steal from me. So like what I don't understand, and this is when people think of personality tests, understanding the type of person or individual that you want to work with. Has anyone ever designed a personality test that isn't just going to make you either a productive individual or a serial killer? What if you actually asked someone what they want from life? Because I am of the firm belief that there are people who their absolute gift is being able to switch off. All they want is to make a few quid and then they live their lives afterwards. They'll play a game of golf, they'll drive the same car for 20 years, they don't aspire to buy X, Y, Z. That's absolutely fine. Sometimes I envy them, being totally honest with you. Now, you've got someone else who wants to climb the corporate ladder, and someone else who wants to paint. What if we looked at the work-life balance in inverted commas as being that really in-depth personality test, which was, well, you know what, this person's a phenomenal analyst. They're really good at what they do. They've got a great way of figuring out data, extrapolating what we need to learn, and really driving value. But you know what? They really, really love rally driving. And they want every Friday off to go to rally school in Monaghan, the rally school up in Ireland. If that person feels like they're being heard, then they're going to work twice as hard. And I don't mean this in the devious sense. I don't mean I'm going to give you this and you're going to, by God, I'm going to get my pound of flesh. But when you think of the idea of the real estate and someone spending, 400 million over the next 10 years, upgrading office space and investing in a long-term lease, and they said, well, let's take a fraction of that and ask people what they actually bloody want. Like, what if someone wants to become fluent in French? What if someone wants to become whatever? Get an MBA, and instead of footing the bill themselves, that they do it. What is this antiquated idea? And like, don't get me wrong, I am all for when I do an introductory call with someone or a discovery call, I will not do it over the phone. It has to be Zoom or it has to be in person. I will be the first to say that's how I understand my verbal cues.
Yeah.
That's how I pay attention to what people aren't telling me. And it's a great way to connect. So I'm of the firm belief that there is a lot of connection to be had. But like you said, if there isn't that group atmosphere when, let's say, if you're a developer or if you're in some area of audit where you don't have to be in something with someone, there's no collaborative effort, and you have that particular mindset, you're not wasting time commuting into town, you're not wasting time commuting back. And also, if you're not very socially inclined, you're not spending mental energy on trying to have polite, ridiculous chit chat over crap coffee and finding out who brought eggs in and put them in the microwave when they weren't supposed to. So my question is it that is it difficult when someone is trying to like, obviously they're becoming a little bit more discerning in what they want from life. So I've heard from people who are hiring, they're hearing all these requests or demands from people when it comes to that work-life balance, and they almost poo-poo it.
Yeah.
But if you were an employer or a business owner and you're trying to think ahead of the trends, how can you navigate all of that and actually still see a viable business where you're building out your business model, you create profit, you drive demand, and you maybe potentially take a view to the long-term legacy, but without thinking too archaically? What's one to do when they think of it that way?
Well, that's kind of the work that I've been working on for the past number of years. You'll be familiar with the genius drivers that I keep talking about.
Yep.
And you'll be familiar with having a purpose-driven business. So that's kind of the personality test in order to try and find out what is it that you unconsciously really love doing. Ultimately, that's where you get fulfillment from, where you get kind of the zest for life and so on. That's exactly where we need to get to. So like that, in terms of not necessarily that you want to go motor car racing on the Friday. If that's it, well then great, that's a passion. But if you align an individual's genius drivers to the work that they're doing within the business itself, they'll work all the hours God sends because they're doing something that they unconsciously are driven to be fulfilled. That's ultimately it. If somebody's really enjoying what they're doing, they're getting fulfillment from it. Now what you then do is you align that to, okay, what is it the business wants to actually achieve? And you come up with a way of, okay, so how can the individual get what they want to achieve, as well as the business has their objectives or what they want to achieve, and you marry the two of them together. I remember having a mastermind group a number of years ago of different business owners, and one of them was an accountant trying to get staff and all the kinds of things, and there were same complaints, can't get any staff and so on. And I put forward on the table, so yeah, but hang on a minute, you've got employees that want to buy a house or build financial wealth, but you're not teaching your staff how to buy a house or how to build financial wealth, getting a mortgage from that perspective and looking at it from that side of things. So I said, they've got personal goals that they want to achieve. You've got business goals that you want to achieve. Why not marry the two of them together? And in some respects, it was a light bulb moment for them, but they had never really considered what is it that the staff want. Every single human being will only do something when they perceive that there's more benefits to them, both consciously and unconsciously. So if you find out what are the benefits to the staff member, you're going to have them working for you as opposed to, as in collectively for you and for the business, as opposed to having two different, totally opposite objectives. And if that's to go Formula One racing, well then, yeah, great. But let's have those discussions. And that's where I feel business needs to transition to. It is slowly getting there. Not as fast as what I would like to see it, but it is slowly getting there.
Do you think it's a sign of people perceive it as a sign of weakness if they're seen to be too, it's like you can't be seen to show too much love or be shown to be too empathetic to people's needs because it's kind of an us versus them, as opposed to familiarity breeds contempt. So if I bring such and such in from a department and I say, listen, what is it you want from life? And they might say, I really want to, whatever, put my kids through college or whatever it could be, or learn upskill. I want to do more than I'm doing now. Funny enough, as a slight aside, for anyone who is listening, I did do the Pilot's Manual with you a number of years ago, and it was one of the most impactful things I've ever done. And the reason I loved it so much was actually it was so simple in how it was laid out, but so profound in the role I play in everyday life. And I realized that I was leaning into the things that I enjoyed, that I was good at, and had an aptitude for. And the more I've leaned into those, even when circumstances are challenging, I'm still in line with what I want to do. So it's much like that work-life balance where there's times when the SH1T hits the fan, but I'm doing everything I love mostly all the time.
Yeah.
Which is so important. So when you're taking that viewpoint, this is actually one of the very profound things. And I know I used the racing idea as a kind of a joking novelty. If there's people listening now that have a business and maybe have between 5, 10, 15, 30 employees, I was at an event last week and they were talking about the biggest issue they had was actually finding good staff and staff who didn't want the social media type lifestyle. 100 grand now seems like it's monopoly money at this stage. People overlook that as if they don't think it's anything. It might as well be minimum wage as far as some people are concerned. But if you're trying to grab the ear of someone who has good staff, how do you think they can start that conversation or start to turn the tide or the atmosphere in a business where they can open the door to those kind of conversations without feeling too vulnerable? The office door is always closed and people might see them at the Christmas party for the first round and don't see them again, but they're trying to figure out how to get it to that next stage. What would you say to them?
You start small and you always treat it as a pilot. I don't mean a pilot as in aircraft pilot. So you start small and you do it as a pilot project. So you have the open conversation with your team and you say, okay, so here's what is it that you guys want to achieve personally? And this may be one-to-one or maybe collectively as well. What is it that you want to achieve? Here's what the business wants to achieve. You get a marriage between the two of them. We're going to run it as a pilot program and we're going to run it as to see what we can actually achieve collectively together. And I've no doubt in my mind you'll get success from it. Absolutely. And it'll be financial success as in profits, but equally also qualitative success within the business and amongst the team, morale, camaraderie and all those things, and longevity with the team. So you start off and with that success, now you're moving into, okay, so we've now done it for this year, 2025. Let's see now what we can do for 2026. And you literally just build on year out.
And see, as you say that, I get a smile across my face because it flies in the face of the concept of the work-life balance in inverted commas. But that's a real cliche. It's like you've been marketed to, let's say breakfast is the most important meal of the day. You forget where it started and you wonder why you do it. But you do it because it was always sold. Whereas you tell me that particular idea there, it's my natural inclination to want to know what drives someone. Like when I meet someone, it's like, what's their version of it? It's like if someone refers me business or someone recommends me, there's no point in me sending them a bottle of champagne for the sake of it. I'm kind of thinking to myself, okay, based on the conversations, I say, what gets that person going? What drives them? Is it a book voucher? Is it a recommendation? Is it dinner? Is it an experience? Or is it a coffee with me to actually have another great conversation, whatever it may be? But there's untold value in listening to what people want.
Yeah.
That's actually ironically, that's the cliche. That's the gold mine that's sitting in your front office that if you don't ask, you're literally leaving the vault door shut and you're not getting the opportunity. And then what might happen is they might feel that they haven't been listened to, that they've run their course in this particular business or enterprise, and then they go somewhere where they hope someone else might actually ask that question.
Yeah, it'll be valued. You got to find out what lights them up.
Oh man, I love that.
Because it is real, and you find out what lights them up, but then you can imagine what the business will be like.
I get excited thinking about it. Like we're having this conversation because we decided to have interesting conversations. And that gives the blank canvas to not know where it's going to go, to have an opportunity to be frank, potentially say the odd bad word, perish the thought, and wear some phenomenal glasses, the both of us. I mean, there's nothing else. But when you think of that, what lights people up, I actually think that should be the way to finish this conversation is, what if you ask the question about what could light up those who either support you or are in your business, and how, if you wrote down the what if, how that could impact you, your business, but even your personal interactions. Like what if you have someone around you that is you're meeting for pints on a regular basis, but what if they want to do something else?
The only caveat I'd put on it is that it's what lights you up from an unconscious perspective. You know, you could pursue what you're passionate about and what your passions are, but that's going to be transient. That's going to be short-lived. So you've got to find out what lights you up from an unconscious perspective. So what you were referring to earlier on in relation to the genius drivers and the pilot's manual, that's your unconscious. That's what lights you up from an unconscious perspective. And you can make those happen in an infinite number of different ways. So that's the difference. Whereas if you try and find, okay, so what lights you up? And what somebody might say is, yeah, well, getting a half day on Friday lights me up. Or go for, a couple of drinks after work lights me up. No, it doesn't. They're just passions. They're just things that kind of give you that amygdala part of the brain, but they don't activate the executive center part of the brain, the most important parts of the brain. So you got to find out from what actually lights you up from an unconscious perspective. That's what I call your genius drivers. That's what gives you the fulfillment. And that's throughout your whole life. It literally is with you from birth until you die. And when you're getting fulfilled from that perspective, now you got a much deeper sense of enjoyment, of loving what you do.
Okay, so I'm going to go back on what I said before. It's not about asking people for pints on a Friday. What we're going to leave people with, it's to ask that question, but to ask it with more depth. So instead of, like you said, if you ask someone that question, they say a half day on a Friday, that's surface level. You have to have the conviction to ask again. I always say to people, you can ask a question more than once, and it's all about how you say or not say anything afterwards. Like if I ask you, how are you doing? And you say fine, and I keep looking at you, I want either another answer because I know it's surface level, or I want to ask it in a different way. So let's maybe leave people with the opportunity.
Yeah, but trying to find out, sorry to cut across, Andrew, because this is important for people in terms of, because as you're saying that, the question comes up is, well, how do I find that for people? So my answer to that one is that from the point of view of identify the things in your life that you are naturally drawn to do. And when you've done them, where has your energy increased? To give you an example, you love meeting with people, you love connecting with people, you love having coffees with people, but it has to be a really good, deep conversation. It has to be somebody whereby you've had a really good conversation as opposed to talking about the weather or talking about politics or whatever it might be. Those kind of conversations will do your head in. But for you, it's having those deep connections. And those deep connections can happen in multiple different ways. But after having one of those deep connections, you'll feel buzzed. Your energy will have increased. Your cup will have been filled as opposed to being drained. So it's looking at what are the activities that you're naturally drawn towards fulfilling. What are those activities? And now you'll have a good idea as regards When you start to identify those, now you look at, okay, so how could you create your life in such a way that you're having more of those activities that you're naturally drawn to fulfill? Does that make sense?
On that note, I think we should leave it there because you said it better than I ever could. I will admit it. I'm not perfect, Paul, but I'm so close it scares me. And as my mother used to say, where's the other percent gone? But we're not going to look for today. So hopefully we've left people with an interesting angle as to how to look at getting the best out of themselves, but other people, but in a beyond the normal myth of what productivity is. I think it's an important question to ask people to ask themselves is what, following on the original stories you tell ourselves, but the myth of the work-life balance is just that, it's a myth. And I think if you listen to this episode and you ask yourself those questions, we'd love to know your thoughts. And if you've got any feedback for us, contact us, ask us any more questions. And if you've any questions about the pilot's manual, don't hesitate to contact Paul as well. And that's it for another episode of Beyond Just Business. If it gave you something to think about or it helped you see things a little differently, we're delighted. But make sure you're following so you don't miss out on the next episode. Stay curious, keep questioning, and we will see you next time.